Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. We are coming to you live from the massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I am joined, as we have flipped the calendar, we're now in 2026, Aaron Delp, Brandon Whichard from Software Defined Talk. Guys, great to be back with you. Great to see you in the flesh, or at least over Zoom. How's everybody doing? How was your holidays?
I'm doing fantastic. I've consumed approximately 700 hours of football, both professional and college. I've seen a little bit of my family and basically just been doing that. And honestly, I think the staycation vacation where you just sit home and watch sports, very underrated. I loved it. Loved every minute of it.
2 weeks. It sounds like it's perfect. Are you, like you said, saw just enough of your family to recognize who they were, and everything else was on your terms. Aaron, you were traveling a bit. How was the travels?
No, travels were good. Travels good. Yeah, we took the family and we went out to Park City, Utah, skiing, or trying to ski. We did get some skiing in. The snow was shit this year, but it was still good. Still had a great time. The kids didn't fight too bad, so it was a good trip overall.
Nice. Do you guys, either one of you, have any really good holiday, traditions or things that you do that are news and noteworthy of I look forward to this every year, or is it literally just I don't have to work, I get to watch a lot of football, there's unlimited sweets in the house at all times?
No,
we have
I think
all
it's
of that.
All what you just said.
I was gonna say we have all of that, but I would say not so much an unusual tradition, and just an early tradition. My wife puts up the Christmas tree the day after Halloween, so it's November 1st. Whenever. I mean, it's the moment. The moment's really unacceptable, but it's up for 2 months, right? And it just feels I don't know, just kind of becomes in the background. It's this is how the house is decorated. So she just officially took it down. So I was very sad. I was I don't know, maybe we should just leave it up year round. You seem to really like it. Maybe we'll just turn the lights to just the white, make it look a little bit more subtle. So that's the only thing I would say that's unusual. But she's always hey, I want as much Christmas as I can have. I'm sounds good to me.
Yeah. I know. We leave. I got to take the lights down today. I think maybe the outside lights. I think the Christmas tree usually stays up till middle of January, just because we sort of like it as a background. The kids have left. It's a little bit of there, and then neither one of us really want to take that last piece apart. All right, take this down and all that sort of stuff. So, well, good stuff, boys. Obviously it's January 2nd, which is a kind of the hangover. One of the major hangover holidays here in America, right after the Super Bowl, day after the Super Bowl. Thoughts on the college football playoff? We can't start the show without diving into that. It feels like the thing that we've kind of always wanted, which is the Titans, at least the tier 2 Titans have taken over. The tier 1 Titans are mostly out. Overall thoughts on the college football playoffs?
I think it's been fantastic, and I was thinking about this as you're saying it there. It's sort of a huge changing of the guard for those many listeners that don't follow. So it's all the really, really juggernauts, as you were alluding to, have been eliminated. And it leaves us with, 4 teams that have not either never won a national championship or haven't won in a really long time. And I was thinking about this as related to tech. And it's why did this happen? Right? What is going on? And I think it's one of these things where the conditions of college football have changed so much that, the traditional powers are the advantages they once had are just no longer advantages. Basically being that you can pay the players now directly, don't have to lie about it. And of course, players can just transfer whenever they want if they're not getting playing time or they're unhappy with the coach. And what we see here is sort of I think it's just a great metaphor even for tech, because I know one of the stories here is we have AWS and their big, announcements this month. And we'll talk about this in a second. But I was seeing the same thing. It's AWS is still a juggernaut, but the world of tech has really just changed around them, right? The idea that being great at primitives, having this giant data centers, having all of the facilities, it's everything is so different. It's they're doing the same thing. It reminds me of a little bit of Georgia just being one team. It's Georgia is still doing the same things to be a great football team. It's just everything around them has changed. And it's sort of interesting because I was thinking of Kirby Smart, their coach, as well as Andy Jassy. They're the ones that kind of talking about oh, kids today, right? Why? And it's sort of what they're saying is why did everything change? I liked it the way it was before, but you hear about like the upstarts like Indiana and all the companies we're going to talk about, OpenAI, NVIDIA. They're like, we love it. You know, NVIDIA's like, we love it. We were out here in the wilderness building these like graphic processors. Nobody cared. Everything changed and came our way. So it's just interesting to like think about that in terms of business. It's like so much we like to focus in on the people, but it's the conditions around the environment that like bring success. What do you think, Aaron?
No, I think I'm going to also compare it. I really like the playoff, but I'm going to compare it to the Gartner hype cycle. And the reason why is, I don't know if everyone remembers, because like, you know, the second round of playoffs was really freaking good. But the first round of playoffs with those 11 and 12 teams, it was horrible. And so we went straight into the trough of disillusionment of like, oh my gosh, this 12 team system, like this absolutely sucks. And like everyone was talking so bad about the playoff and how bad it was. And this is just going to be awful. And then the next round came along and it was pretty freaking good. And a lot of the lower teams upset. And so now everyone's like, oh, this playoff system's great. And so who knows what's going to happen, right? Like you're only like, I feel like the college playoffs is only as good as the last round of playoffs, because we very quickly
very well said
from this is the worst ever to this is the best ever.
Yeah, I think the other thing, and I struggle with this a little bit as I transition. Like I used to play sports, and now I'm stuck in the business world, and you know, for a long time, it's like you know, the business world, and then like, you know, your customers and all that sort of stuff. Like it has technical debt, it has just ongoing like legacy stuff. Like from season to season, like you don't like the season starts over, the records start over, right? So you know, all of the you know, monster team legacies, they don't matter. You know, it's a little bit like the one coach said, like, hey, my players don't know about the legacy of their team. They just know what they've seen this year. And I think that is like you said, Brandon, when you combine that with all the rules have changed and, you know, you don't have to start over like, oh, Google doesn't get to start the game with $200 billion in the bank or something. It makes things interesting. I don't know if it, you know, people are going to complain on the off season that it's unstable, but it's fun right now. Here's the other thing. I think anybody who's listening, and if you're, you know, if you've been listening and you're not listening from the United States, so you don't care about sports, and you've been like, God damn, it's been 7 minutes already. These guys won't shut up. The good news for all of us, and we get something to learn here. There are a crap load of international sports happening this year between the Olympics and the World Cup. Like we're going to have all kinds of things to talk about that might, you know, interest somebody from outside the United States that listens and watches football. So stay tuned for that for the rest of the year. Guys, we got some stuff we're going to have to start like boning up on like curling and you know, a bunch of Olympic
well, at least sports. The World Cup. We got to get our soccer or football. That's what it says. We got to like learn the players and the rosters. We got to get ready for the summer. At
least a few of them. All right. Well, Brandon, you mentioned it. Let's start with, and it's hard to believe, you know, we used to do an entire show for many, many years on all the announcements of AWS reInvent, because it was such a big deal. We would do an entire show on like, here was the keynote and so forth. And then we do an entire show just on the announcements. This year it has been relegated to just you know, a line in the good old fashioned cloud news, linking to a blog from them that just says top announcements. Like they don't even give, I feel like they don't even give every single, you know, Jeff Barr feature an announcement page anymore. It's just like they lump them together. What were your guys' thoughts on reInvent this year? Did you have any, you know, overwhelming thoughts, or were you just like, God, I can't believe it came and went and we didn't really focus on it that much?
Well, I had two thoughts. I think one you hit on. One, if you watch the keynote, it was crazy how the keynote was only 1 hour. And all of the traditional compute, storage, networking announcements were done in like almost like a lightning round fashion. It was like, I think it was like 25 announcements in like, I don't know, 10 minutes or something. Yeah. And he just went through everything, which honestly was both good and bad. It was like, yeah, this is pretty boring. We probably don't need to spend 3 hours on this. But at the same time, it was like a real changing of the guard. But then, Aaron, I thought of you, right? Because you've been saying this a lot about, you know, I think in the world of AI, it's about applications, right? And it's sort of like, you know, solutions, let's call that, whatever, broadly speaking. And I thought like most of the thing I took away was them talking mostly about their AI solutions, Nova and Nova LLM and Amazon Bedrock. So it's sort of like, I think they've kind of, you know, I don't know if they've taken your device directly, but I think they're trying to do what you've suggested, Aaron. I just don't think, you know, it's one of these things like getting back to the football analogies, like, I just don't know if they have the players, you know, it's like, I think they know what they want to do, but they don't necessarily have all the players to do it. So I really was interested in, Aaron, your take on the whole AWS keynote.
Yeah. So here's what I'll add. First of all, is I will say the overwhelming impression I got from it was that change in the way it's put out, the way it's, executed. I noticed all of that about all of the announcements being lumped together, this, the speed dating, if you will, or speed running through all of this stuff. Like it was kind of crazy to me, but it is kind of says, okay, yeah, this is going in a different direction, and it's different leadership and different motives going forward. The thing that was most interesting to me was the Nova Forge announcement. So the Nova Forge announcement, for those that aren't familiar out there, that it's basically taking a Nova LLM and doing some post-training on it and basically being able to customize it. And that's where I was kind of also going with a lot of this stuff earlier of okay, we need solutions and we need very specific things. And this will allow somebody to take a Nova LLM and, apply post-training to it and have a more specialized, Nova LLM. Interesting concept. It'll be interesting to see what it's like in practice. Like, does it take a team of data scientists? Can anybody do this? There's still a lot of unknowns around it. But I thought that was far and away the most interesting thing to me. And then Brian, I didn't actually watch the keynote, so I'm going to kick it over to you. Was Jensen there? Was our drinking game, fulfilled?
No,
or not?
I don't think Jensen was not there. Although, NVIDIA was mentioned. They talked about, how they have lots of NVIDIA chips available if you want them. And NVIDIA is a great partner. But neither Jensen showed up with his leather jacket, or Docker was not mentioned. So, nobody got drunk during if you were playing any of the drinking games.
The only people on stage, I believe, were just customer testimonials. And there were 2 or 3, and that was it. It was very short in comparison to the previous ones.
It was, it was weird. It was sort of like, it was like the AWS keynote without any of the things that you either really like or you really don't like, right? It wasn't overly long, right? So for those of people who are like, oh man, it's amazing that Andy can crank through all that stuff, and he's got total control of his business. I mean, like Matt's fine. He does the thing. He obviously knows his stuff, but I mean, there was very little where you were like, oh wow, right? There was nothing that Amazon announced that was like they were the first to do it, right? It was hey, we have an agent framework, and it was like, okay, cool. So you've got this agent core thing, and then they were, they're like, hey, we have NVIDIA chips like everybody else, but we also have our own chips, which we've had the same ones for a long time, and there was nothing wrong with it. And if you were an AWS customer, you were probably just like, okay, cool, I feel good about what they're doing on the cloud, and they keep building out data centers, but it just didn't have, I don't know, it didn't have anything that inspired you where you were like, we've picked the company that's going to take us into the future. You've sort of picked the company that is like, hey, we're trying to keep up with the future, which is just a weird situation for AWS to be in, and therefore I think it sort of colors everything about how it's presented. Like it just, they didn't double down on being like, we're the best cloud. They sort of like Brandon said, they just dumped it all in the last 10 minutes into this weird speed dating thing. Like, yeah, we did a lot of cloud stuff. I'm sure you all care about that, blah, blah, blah. And then, yeah, you would have thought they did some of the normal stuff where they did the NASCAR, things of like, hey, there's lots of customers that use our stuff. But you would have thought if you're only going to anchor everything on your big LLM and your agent thing, you would have spent more time being like, let me show you how it works. Let me answer Aaron's question of is this going to take a team of data scientists, or is this going to be amazing that we can do it faster? Or they didn't seem to do any of those things where they either amaze you that the technology is really cool, or they're way ahead of stuff, or they had a moonshot. It was a very weird sort of thing. And I'm very curious, a lot of times Amazon, you're like, all right, they get better customer feedback than anybody else because they are ahead. I'm wondering what kind of customer feedback they're getting around AI stuff these days, because it doesn't. I don't know. I should say that I don't know who you would necessarily go to for enterprisey stuff, right? I know who you go to for the other ones, but it was a very, very weird one. And it does make me wonder, since they've put the cloud in the 10-minute box at the end, do they break out the cloud as its own keynote going forward, and then there's an AI keynote, or do they keep trying to? I don't know. It feels like a real weird crossroads for AWS. Even though, again, revenue wise, they're still doing very, very well. So it just felt like a very weird thing.
Yeah, I was simply going to add, it made me think about this. I forgot to say it, but it added to what you said, Brian, of the general vibe I got from, a bunch of the things afterwards and kind of reading about it was it felt like there was almost like an AI checklist. Like, hey, I need to announce something around agents. I need to announce something around training. I need to announce something around, S3 and vectors. I need to announce an LLM. And maybe a lot of the reasons why they didn't go into the depth of it is they were kind of checking the boxes to fill out the portfolio, and it's probably not a place they're used to being in. And more like, hey, we just need to get all this out and check all the boxes so we can say we have it, so people, stop asking us where these things are. But at the same time, they may not have had enough cook time yet.
Yeah. I mean, the other weird thing that happened, and I should put this in the notes, I think it happened at the end of the month. So apparently Andy Jassy decided, I need to pull out a bunch of people from AWS and some other parts in the company to create this generative AI team. And it was kind of a weird announcement. It kind of came out. It was, it was kind of vague. It was like, yeah, we're taking a few of these smart people and we're putting them into this, generative AI team, but it was going to report to Andy. And so it's this weird thing of when Amazon when talks about AI stuff, a lot of times it comes from Andy and it doesn't necessarily come from being so I don't know if they're trying to recreate the thing of Amazon's our first best customer. And so, a year from now, the stuff that came out of there will happen into AWS, but it also makes you think well, Amazon's a gigantic company. They do all sorts of leading edge stuff in a lot of different sectors. If they're learning from what they do, why haven't those things turned into Amazon services like they did in the past? So again, it's this sort of what is Andy trying to signal? What is he not trying to signal? He wasn't there at this year's show, but he was randomly there at last year's show. And it's I don't know. It feels very disconnected. And I think it's probably hard for them, I don't know, to explain stuff from not the position of being the absolute leaders of stuff and sort of, saying, hey, this is where the world's going, like they did for 15 years in cloud. So I don't know.
Yeah. And just to add on there, I think the official name is it's a centralized AI and advanced technology group. And it has its own set of leadership, and all of that reports up to Andy Jassy. So yeah, I don't know. It's sort of what does that mean? I don't know. I mean, to your broad point, I'm not sure, but it's a separate group and it reports directly to Andy. And so is that good for AWS, bad for AWS? Who knows?
Yeah. I don't know if it's sort of trying to follow the Google path or something like that, where they sort of centralized everything again. But all right, so that kind of wrapped up the cloud stuff. I don't think there was a whole lot of other cloud news other than I guess we could. Well, we'll save it for the AI stuff because it really kind of ties into there. A lot of stuff. I felt like this last month, we probably can summarize it in a couple of things. There were a number of announcements that made you really kind of go, okay, the 2026 is going to be a year of at least enterprise AI deflation. So you had a couple of things. You had reports that Microsoft was lowering their sales quota for AI offerings. So, sort of implying that people weren't necessarily buying as much, or they were pushing back on some of the pricing on some of the stuff. You had Salesforce, making some claims that their customers weren't that enamored with the results of the LLM stuff, and so internally, Salesforce was trying to tune back how much Gen AI related stuff they were slamming into customers and trying to push a little more sort of predictive AI stuff. You had, you had a company called Blue Owl, who is one of the financing companies behind the scenes, had declined to build one of the Oracle AI data centers because they didn't feel like the economics were there. So, it felt like at least across a few of big companies, and I don't know if they put them out on purpose or if they got leaked or whatever, but there was enough stuff from several big companies that you just kind of went okay, there's some interesting data points there. And we get wrapped up in all the NVIDIA OpenAI stuff, but did any of the enterprisey, Gen AI stuff sort of surprise you that it was as blatant or blunt as it was, as opposed to people having to dig into the numbers and sort of, decode something might not be as great as it is?
I don't know. I think it generally jives with what you see. It's sort of there's an incredible amount of talk about the enterprise, even back to our last topic, AWS. But then what are people actually doing? It seems to be a huge gulf, right? It's about when you actually go into a company And, there's all these things it could do, right? Salesforce Sync and like automate all this stuff. But most people, I think, are maybe using Copilot or a chat bot here and working on rewriting their emails and maybe, working on their presentations. But it isn't like this, like, there's not this massive ROI savings that anyone can point to. I think there's just a hunch that like it'll come, but we don't really see it day to day. Thoughts, Aaron?
No, I was going to say, I think this is this growing divide we're starting to see the same way, like when we first were talking about Gen AI in general, like everyone needed to understand the concepts. And that's when like the whole idea of training and fine tuning and inferencing came into being. Like, hey, it's two different stages with very different needs and very different applications and what's going on. And the same way we're starting to see a continuing divide between prosumer and consumer and enterprise AI. I think everything that we're talking about is absolutely, we're kind of trying to force consumer and prosumer into the enterprise and call it enterprise AI. But I don't think it's a true enterprise use case, right? Like with the Copilot stuff or like Salesforce baking things in. And like, I know I've talked about it on the show in the past. Like I'm of the opinion the consumer and prosumer stuff almost becomes a baked in feature to a lot of these things. Like Google Gemini, like, hey, it's just baked in and we charge a little more for it. You're already starting to see, Google and Gemini go down that path. And so this almost feels like there's going to be a lot baked in, and that I think that's going to be consumer and prosumer. And then there's going to be true enterprise AI, but it's hard. And it's complex and it's bigger than just Gen AI or agentic AI and some of these other things. And so I just think 2026, if nothing else, is going to be the year where you're going to see this bifurcation in what AI looks like in the industry.
Yeah, I would agree. I think we're gonna see a split between people, kind of thinking like AI is everything to everyone, business and consumer, and people are going to start doing what they've always done in the past, which is like there are market segments, there are characteristics of them, work accordingly. And just a perfect example of that is like Microsoft, again allegedly sort of potentially lowering some sales quotas, but at the same time, them being very enterprise centric and understanding this stuff. There's already talk of them coming out and offering a whole bunch of like training funds to customers or through systems integrators or other people to basically be like, how do I, what do I need to do? What do I need to do to get you into this car? What do I need to do to get you into this Copilot, not just let it sit there as shelfware? And so I think, just seeing a couple of these things come out, it tells me that like, the enterprise companies that are listening to their customers, even if whether or not they're using all the stuff, they're trying to figure out, okay, how do I avoid this thing being, round 1 shelfware versus being like round 5 shelfware or something like that. Because again, they can't afford to do it because again, the cost to deliver it, to just have it sit there is much more than it used to be. Marginally it used to cost $0 once you ship the CD out there. Now it's now there's an ongoing meter that's running all the time. I think the other thing that was interesting to me this last month in particular, and there's lots of things there, was the thing we've talked about a lot, which is NVIDIA is sitting there on a $5 trillion give or take market cap, and on one hand it's like, well, we've sold all of our chips, we're a little bit at the at the mercy of the fight between the U.S. and China over whether or not they get to sell into that market. But I do feel like they did a few things that, while they may not be huge headlines, did feel like they were being aggressive and being like, all right, can I control my own future? And so a couple of those things, I think the biggest of them was I'll call it an acqui-hire. So there's a company called Grok. We've talked about them a number of times. Grok with a Q, not Grok with a not Elon's company, but sort of an inference chipset company that they didn't acquire them completely because I don't think we're going to see any like full-on acquisitions because of concerns about antitrust and stuff. But they basically did the acqui-hire thing where they acquired all their leaders and they get first dibs on their technology for about $20 billion. I think this is pretty interesting in the, hey, we there's something in inference at a hardware level that needs to be cheaper than what we deliver today with our premium product. To me, this is really, really important, but it kind of came out at a weird time, and I don't think it's gotten as much visibility as maybe it should be.
I would actually add to that though. It's even the opposite of, hey, it didn't get a lot. I feel like, and again, opinion of Aaron, this was intentionally buried. Like I texted Brian because it came out after hours on Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh man, if you want to bury something, that's how you bury it. like
Santa and you.
Now,
Yeah.
I will say this. So my previous company, I worked very closely with Grok. So I know the folks over there know a lot about this, know a lot about Grok Cloud, the technology. I like, my heart hurts for the folks over there because I mean, I don't know for a fact, but I'm assuming they got screwed. I'm sure Jonathan and the founders all, made out super, super well. But at the end of the day, I mean, Grok Cloud was nothing more than a front end to sell Grok LPUs and get everyone using Grok LPUs. It was like the first step. If they're going to acquire the leadership, acquire the technology without buying the technology and kind of just leave Grok Cloud hanging out to dry. Like, I don't know how well, I wish them the best. I really do. But I think at the end of the day, I mean, they were an LPU company trying to, sell a cloud front end as the first hit is free. Kind of thing.
Well, I wonder if this is like a sign that this let's call it the licensing to get around antitrust is just sort of standard operating procedure. And I think for everybody that's not a founder or not like one of the key 5 people, I just think this goes in your startup risk factor. It's like, well, it used to be like the company may just go out of business, right? And you're just like, and everyone sort of had to live with that, if you will. We won together, we failed together. But now it seems like even if you're at one of these companies that potentially has can be acquired, it's like, unless you're sure you're within like the key 5 people, there's a big chance you'll just be stuck in a shell of this company. So we saw this with Windsurf, Character AI, just a bunch of them. So, it's just like an interesting, I think somehow we've ended up in a place where like no one's really happy. This is sort of like getting around antitrust. So if you're in favor of antitrust, this sort of like gets around that. And at the same time, it doesn't do anything for like the rank and file employee, right? So I don't know, it'll be interesting if anyone like looks at this, like, does anyone really happy with this? Even the founders and the way the companies are doing it, like, I don't know, they probably would have just been happier. Just like, let's just buy this whole, like the lawyers, like, let's just buy it. We own everything. Let's, hire all the employees, find them jobs, or, send them on their way with a nice big, severance / option check. So I'll be interested this year to see if anything changes on this front.
I'm also going to be interested if somebody, clever lawyer, somebody from AMD, somebody from Intel, because in essence, you bought the 5 or 6 sort of founders, right? At whatever premium you paid for them, but at least as far as the wording goes, it basically says like, and they're going to use like a non-exclusive access to their technology, and so you do wonder if like, could somebody end up sort of owning essentially the licensing of it on the cheap, right? Like the way that people like squat on like patents and stuff like that. So like, it would be interesting if the folks at like AMD or Intel or, ARM or anybody like that is like, well, I know I don't have all the smartest people that work on it, but there's some way I can like chisel off some money from these folks for like perpetuity, that maybe they left a loophole open or something like that. Probably not, but it would be an interesting thing to sort of explore, because I got to imagine there's got to be a certain amount of loophole they have to leave open, because it's like, well, if I hired all their people and I took all their, and I own all their technology, but I'm going to say it's not an acquisition, like that is an acquisition.
I like that though. It's almost like, who's going to call the bluff? Who just wants to step in and buy Grok, buy everything that's left, and be like, yeah, all right, well, we're now the licensor like of this thing to NVIDIA, and be like, what legal remedies do I have? Or do they just try to change the contract too? Like, actually, no, now we own it. And that would be very interesting.
Or you're really just betting, you're like, yeah, I hope NVIDIA does really well, and I'm going to take, 50 cents on every chip that you sell or something like that.
Yeah, no, I like that. Now, I do think though, just from NVIDIA's side, it's like, I just look at it, $20 billion of insurance. You're like, oh yeah, Aaron, sounds like you know a lot more about Grok. It's like, well, if they have the next great thing, $20 billion is nothing for NVIDIA, right? It's like, what we have so much money, we literally don't know what to spend it on. So why not buy this insurance policy? And if it just works out to be like, we hired smart people and maybe that like makes its way into the future of NVIDIA chips, like, so be it. It's just like, it's just no downside at all for them.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, I talked a bunch about Grok and kind of LPUs and TPUs and non-GPUs on actually the last show that just published a couple days ago. So this is what happens when you kind of record them and then the news in this industry moves so fast. Here's the thing, like Grok has a decent LPU. I would argue Samba Nova is bigger and better at scale. Grok, the bigger the LLM is, it just doesn't scale super well, and it gets really nerdy into like it's basically how much memory do they have per processor. They don't quite have enough, at least on the first generation. But what's super interesting here that I actually take it back even a step further, for everyone out there that's listening that's considering a startup, we've done lots of startup advice over the years, and we've kind of always said like, hey, early on, hey, accelerate your learning, and maybe you can make a quick buck. And it used to be the whole like, hey, get to a C round or a D round, an IPO, or sell yourself off, or those other things like that. There's a decent chance of a cash event. And then there was this kind of move, and this one never really, we talked about it once or twice, I think, Brian, over the years, but basically, founders kept stretching things out, but founders could cash out along the way. So the founders would make money, but they'd go for an E round, an F round, all these other rounds. And, the regular rank and file didn't necessarily make a lot of money. And now we moved into this third stage, which is this acqui-hire, acqui-hire founders leave everyone else behind, get around regulations and antitrust stuff. So it almost feels like the economics and climate of startups and the natural kind of roadmap that a lot of startups have done in the past is just completely flipped on its head now. Like if you're not doing it for a whole bunch of experience really fast, like I don't necessarily know why you would do a startup anymore.
Yeah, I think there's there'll be two interesting things that sort of come out of this. I mean, obviously we've had a whole year of these variations on acqui-hires happening, and so it'll be interesting to see if there becomes a bunch of language from VCs and other investors to try and protect themselves somehow. But I think the other thing that's going to be interesting is like, all right, you spent $20 billion on somebody. Like, did you just kill it? Or do you really think this is like, is this the beginning of, a portfolio that says like the demand is going to be 100x what it is today, and therefore, there needs to be a portfolio like different price points for different use cases down the road. And I don't know how long we'll find out before that happens. Like, when does this become a thing? But like for $20 billion in normal days, you'd go like, oh God, $20 billion. That's a gigantic acquisition. I mean, there's it's way bigger than GitLab. It's almost as big as the Red Hat acquisition. It's it's this, it's that. But at $20 billion in NVIDIA money, you're like, well, okay, well that's what you find in the couch cushion. So did they do this to get rid of them, or did they do this because they really think this is going to change the economic? Like they think they want to be in charge of the economics, and this is a big piece of it. So it'll be an interesting story to follow the rest of the year, and it'll be interesting to see if there are other companies. I mean, because now you've got Google TPUs, you've got Grok's LPU is over there. Like, does this create, kind of the follow-on tsunami that we typically see with acquisitions, which is like, okay, everybody else thinks they got to buy the next best thing, so they're not left out. So worth digging into. So we hit on those. As with most months, I think NVIDIA is allowed to sell into China, but then I'm also not sure if they're allowed to sell into China. I mean, that could, so allegedly they're now allowed to sell into China, and we've delayed the tariffs on chips to, with China until 2027. Folks, it is 1:42 on January 2nd. Don't take that for anything. Like, that could change tomorrow. But at least, in December, those two things were announced. I don't know if that means, they'll be around in February or not. That does feel like it's like the only thing that NVIDIA really has to worry about. Like, okay, whether or not they get to count money going into China or not. That's got to be a weird place to be as far as everything else in NVIDIA, which feels like it's going pretty well.
Well, I think it's them, but the other thing they're always tied to, I mean, we could probably talk about it every day, if not every month for the next, 3 years, is sort of, Sam Altman's attempt to explain how they're going to cover the $1.4 trillion of OpenAI compute. And this is where, NVIDIA is now, in some form, they've done a deal with the OpenAI, and they've invested in OpenAI and all that. So I think, this is maybe the biggest thing that NVIDIA, with all the money they have, and obviously, you can spend 20 billion on Grok, but like, I think what they really want is just like, how many companies can we fund that are going to, create some type of end user demand, whether it be like self-driving, the robots, kind of the idea that, the robot delivery devices, people, and whatever. I mean, you got to think they just have meetings with OpenAI. Like, what else do you guys have on your list that we should try to fund and see if it's going to hit, right? Because we need, they got to be thinking to themselves, we need ChatGPT or OpenAI to really start making money to kind of carry this forward. Because I think, from a stock perspective, the first, if OpenAI comes out and says, we're not doing well, that's going to immediately translate to NVIDIA's, market cap. And probably NVIDIA's probably has like roughly $1 trillion riding on OpenAI, like actually delivering something that makes a lot of money. So, like I said, probably a topic we could literally cover this. We probably will. We probably talk about every month for the 2026 because it's so important.
Well, Brandon, let me wrap this in because this is another story. There was also about Disney invested $1 billion in OpenAI, and now the characters can be used in like their Sora and
Sora
things
app,
like
yeah.
that. But here's the thing. This is so upside down when you really like step back and think about it, because like Anthropic and all the others, it was like, hey, Anthropic is going to pay people to settle these lawsuits and, settle the licensing of this use. Disney came and was like, hey, I'm going to give you money and you can use my characters. Like, and so that's another, Sam's like, yes, absolutely. I'll take your money and I'll let you, now we can legally use all this stuff. And then, Disney went around and I think sued Gemini all at the same time. So it was very much carrot and stick in the industry. But I mean, that's another example of like Sam Altman. I mean, I don't know that I've ever seen it. It's like, hey, I'm not just going to let you use my stuff. I'm going to give you money to use my stuff kind of thing compared to everything else going on. I just thought that was super interesting.
The Disney thing was interesting. I think the people giving them money at this point, especially like they gave them $1 billion. I mean, it's a lot of money. I feel bad saying that like $1 billion isn't a lot of money, but like in the game they're playing, like it feels like everybody who's like, well, I might eventually sue you. So, I should have some stake in what your business is doing. And then also like, maybe I can figure out like what the usage is going to look like, because I'm also trying to upend my own internal, like, development studios and all that sort of stuff like that. That one felt like it wasn't big enough to really be more than just sort of having a stake in the game. But it does bring up it will be a really interesting thing to watch in terms of like, and we haven't covered it a lot on the show, but like, intellectual property and brands and like, what do brand variations look like? And so it's probably also a very interesting, investment to be like, hey, what's going to happen when people start making like, Mickey Mouse, except Mickey Mouse is like, one of the Avengers, and Mickey Mouse is, on the moon, and Mickey Mouse is doing all sorts of, terrible, rated X things. And you're like, all right, we got to get a handle on that because, the mouse is the brand and we got to, but I think if you're just sort of whiteboarding it, you're like, I don't really know what's going to happen. And as we've learned, like we never know what anybody's consumer behavior is going to be with the product, no matter what it sort of thinks it's going to do. So I don't know. The last thing I got is, and I think Brandon pointed this out, we were talking on the last Cloud News of the Month where, Sam went on the BG2 podcast. It was Brad Gerstner, and Brad asked him like, hey, how are you going to pay for this? And he kind of freaked out at him and said, you can sell your stock. And people were like, oh, he's cracking a little bit. Why did he go on this one random podcast and try and explain it again? Like I looked up the podcast. I'd never heard of it before. No offense to whoever does it, but it wasn't like a top 50 podcast. It wasn't the equivalent of Joe Rogan or anybody like that. And he went on and the guy asked him the exact same question. He sort of said like, how are you going to pay for all this stuff? And his answer was just like, people don't understand exponentials. And so you guys don't get it. And I was just like, why are they letting him do that? Like, again, to the thing that we were talking about before the show, like, isn't there anybody who's been around long enough? I mean, you're a company who's potentially going to go IPO this year, or within the next 18 months. Like, how are you not controlling or having better control over just the random ass stuff that you're letting him go on podcasts and other things saying, and just being like, what are you doing? Like, how do they let him keep going on there and knowing he's going to get this question and not having any sort of answer whatsoever? I mean, I guess the more I think about this, like maybe this is a me problem, because I'm like, I'm wanting the math to work out, and he just needs to go out there in front of as many people as possible and be like, you're all just too dumb to understand it. You just can't understand it. None of you can understand it. It's beyond any of our comprehension. Because I was like, that's basically what they let this guy go out and say. And I don't know. It's.
But I feel like this dovetails with, wasn't Aaron the one that was predicting that like it'll be questioned whether Sam Altman should be continue to be CEO?
Yeah,
like, wasn't that one of your predictions? Yeah. So I think this is sort of like, this is how it plays out. I think, and another thing, we probably won't go into it, but OpenAI hired the Slack CEO as the chief revenue officer. This is on the back of hiring, I think it's Fiji Simio, former CEO of Instacart, which was like an ads business. So I mean, the way I look at it is, and then rumors are they've hired like, I don't know, 600 type people from Facebook, right? So my feeling is like they're building the ad machine, right? This is the obvious. I mean, this is like the most obvious thing, right?
I mean, build all the things, yeah.
They're trying to build all the things, but the thing that like all of us think that will make money, if we all had to like gun to our head, what could I do to make money? You could sell some type of like Facebook, Google search ad business, right? So I think that is like, those people I think are clearly good at doing that stuff, and they're going to build that. And I think until such time that it's actually built and it's working, and Fiji and this new Slack CEO can like go out there and just talk in plain business terms, like, yeah, we're growing at like 1,000% year over year, and our ad revenue thing is doing this, and we're meeting with advertisers, until you can start to give like go on the venture capitalist podcast and give an answer that a venture capitalist is like, yeah, oh, I totally get it, yeah, that's the multiple. And I think until then, they have Sam, and they just have like, go do your FOMO thing, right? Go wave your little wand and be like, and it has worked. To his credit, it has worked incredibly well, right? But I think this is to Aaron's prediction. It's like, but maybe the FOMO magic wand runs out. It's like at some point, like you've already told us about everything and it hasn't happened. And maybe the last card to play is the Johnny Ive, like, whatever device, like, whatever that device is going to be. Like, we still don't know what it is. And it's like, well, like, this is the year you said you're going to ship it, and you're going to have to show it. And at that point, we're either all going to be like, oh my God, the next iPhone, or we're going to be like very underwhelmed. There's going to be very little middle ground. So I guess a long way of saying, like, I think Sam is like, I just got to get us to that, to these next milestones. And hopefully the ad business or this hardware device leads us to the promised land.
Right. Yeah. Go ahead, Aaron.
No, I was going to say, it reminds me, I mean, it's the Steve Jobs reality distortion field all over again, right? Like in the early days, he had this ability to do those keynotes and drum up excitement, and yeah, no one really asked the questions. And then eventually everything kind of hit. And I mean, he was lucky enough. He had some pretty decent hits there, with the iPhone and the iPad and some of these other things. Right. And then, but then he, and then he kind of goes away, and the company and all that other kind of stuff, like we've already talked about, but we kind of go into operations mode ever since. But I think that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to build it up enough to build that reality distortion field till they get a company that's big enough to do a hit, and then they'll probably boot him out and get some, operations CEO in at some point.
Or maybe maybe it's 6 months before the iPod releases with Jobs, because the rumor was the company was like a few months from not meeting payroll. That to use your metaphor, the distortion field is sort of like being defeated. It's like everybody's kind of over it. And he comes out and he introduces like, a product that's like basically, changes the industry forever. Then that leads to the iPhone, and we all know the story from there. So maybe that's just what's going on here. It's like, we're just 6 months away from this new thing they're going to release, and it'll come out and could blow us away. We'll be like, oh my God, this is the future. And he made it. Or, it's like we talked about, the conditions can change just slightly. People don't want to give them the money as much. The product's not as good, and we'll look at it, I can be like, oh, what a missed opportunity. But it's almost impossible to know.
Yeah. All right, boys. Well, we've gone quite a while on December, which is usually supposed to be a very sleepy month. In fact, most of tech just sort of takes the last week and a half off. So the fact that we got through, 43 minutes of stuff to talk about.
Yeah, we have football to watch. I got to get back.
That's right.
Some games are starting.
That's right. Well, good to see you all, folks. Thanks for listening. As always, thanks for telling a friend, and helping us grow. And 2026 is going to be an interesting year. We've got some stuff coming up, but stay tuned. We will talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.